Alira sat quietly in the corner of her new quarters on the human flagship Resolute. The room was nothing like the grand halls of her father's palace. There were no gold pillars, no carved crystal walls, and no servants bowing at every step. The walls here were plain metal, the bed small but comfortable, and the only decoration was a small window showing the endless black of space. She had been taken from the Dravik homeworld only a week ago, and yet it felt like months. In the beginning, she had expected chains, locked doors, and harsh guards. But Captain Daniel Reeves had done none of that. He had given her freedom to move within certain parts of the ship, had spoken to her with calm respect, and had even told the crew to address her as princess. It confused her. The humans were supposed to see her as a trophy, a prize from their victory. That's what her father had warned her about, but Daniel seemed to have something else in mind. When he entered the room, he carried a data tablet in one hand and a mug of steaming tea in the other. "I thought you might like something warm," he said, placing the mug on the table. "It's a Terran blend, sweet and mild." Alira looked at the drink but didn't touch it. "You bring me tea, but I'm still your prisoner." Daniel gave a small shrug. "Technically, yes, but I didn't bring you here to lock you away. I need your mind, not your silence." She frowned. "My mind? What could you want from me? I am not a soldier. I was never trained for battle." "That's exactly why I want to hear your thoughts," Daniel said, leaning against the wall. "Soldiers see war in one way. You studied your people's history. You know their strengths and their weaknesses." Alira hesitated. In her youth, she had spent hours hidden in the palace library, reading ancient war records and strategy books. Her father had laughed at her interest in such things. "A princess has no need for the art of war," he had said, but the knowledge had stayed with her. "Why do you trust me to speak?" she asked. "I could give you false information." Daniel smiled slightly. "I'll know if you do. And besides, I think you want this war to end as much as I do." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence. Finally, Alira reached for the tea, holding it gently in her hands. The warmth was strange but comforting. "If I were to tell you something, it would not be to help you win," she said softly. "It would be to help us all stop losing." Daniel nodded once. "That's all I ask." Over the next few days, their conversations became longer. Daniel would bring reports of Dravik fleet movements, and Alira would study them, sometimes pointing out patterns the humans hadn't noticed. She never gave away secrets that would doom her people completely, but she also refused to let needless lives be lost on either side. One evening, Daniel showed her a tactical map. "This outpost here," he said, pointing to a small dot in a quiet sector, "is lightly defended, but it's in the path of a large Dravik patrol. If they take it, we lose a major supply route." Alira leaned forward, her eyes scanning the glowing map. "If you defend it directly, you will lose many ships," she said, "but the patrol always travels in a tight wedge formation. That makes them slow to turn. If you lure them toward the asteroid belt here," she traced her finger along the map, "you can force them into a narrow pass and strike their center before they can spread out." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "That's actually brilliant. It is simple," Alira replied, "but your captains must act quickly. The Dravik fear speed more than strength." The plan was put into action. The battle that followed lasted less than an hour. The human fleet suffered minimal losses, and the Dravik patrol retreated in disarray. Word spread quickly through the ship. The fragile princess had saved hundreds of lives. Some crew members began greeting her in the corridors. A few even thanked her. At first, she didn't know how to respond. She was used to respect because of her title, not because of her actions. But this was different. The humans weren't bowing to her. They were treating her as part of the team still. Not everyone was convinced. In the officers' mess, whispers followed her steps. Some said she was a spy. Others feared that Daniel trusted her too much. Alira ignored the comments, but she noticed Daniel watching closely, always ready to defend her if needed. Late one night, she stood alone at the viewing deck, staring at the stars. She thought of her father, who must have heard by now that she was advising humans in battle. What would he think? Anger, no doubt, disappointment, perhaps even shame. Daniel joined her quietly, standing beside her. Couldn't sleep. The stars are different from here, she said, from my homeworld. They are brighter, but maybe it's just my memory. He folded his arms. Do you regret helping us? Alira didn't answer right away. Regret? No. But I know what this means. If my people see me as a traitor, there will be no going back. Daniel looked at her. Sometimes going back isn't the answer. Sometimes you have to go forward, even if it's into unknown space. She smiled faintly. That sounds like something a captain would say. The days passed, and Alira's role grew more important. She studied human technology, learning the strengths of their weapons and the weaknesses in their armor. She combined this with her understanding of Dravic tactics, slowly creating strategies that no single side had ever used before. One afternoon, during a fleet drill, she suggested a formation that blended human speed with Dravic shield patterns. The result stunned the crew. The mock battle was over in minutes. The enemy destroyed before they could react. Daniel watched her from the command chair, a proud smile on his face. Princess, he said, you might be the most dangerous mine in this war, and that's a compliment. Alira lowered her gaze, hiding a small smile. For the first time since her capture, she began to feel something unexpected. Not fear, not resentment, but purpose. She was no longer just the prize of a victorious human captain. She was becoming something else entirely, something her enemies, and perhaps even her father, would soon have to reckon with. The alarm sounded through the corridors of the Resolute, a sharp tone that made every crew member move faster. Red lights flashed across the command deck as officers rushed to their stations. Daniel entered the bridge, his steps steady but urgent. Report, he called. A young officer looked up from her screen. Captain, the outpost on Vega 9 is under attack. Dravic strike fleet, 2 destroyers and 1 battlecruiser. Daniel's jaw tightened. Vega 9 was a small but vital station. It guarded one of the main supply routes to the human colonies in the Outer Rim. If it fell, the loss would ripple through the entire sector. He glanced at the tactical map, then at Alira, who had just stepped onto the bridge. She had been observing drills earlier, but now her eyes were sharp and alert. They'll expect you to send the fleet straight there, she said calmly. That's exactly what I plan to do, Daniel replied. Alira stepped closer to the map. Then they'll have the advantage. Dravic battlecruisers are slow to turn, but their forward weapons are devastating. If you approach in a direct line, they'll hit you before you can get close enough to strike. Daniel studied her for a moment. What do you suggest? She pointed to a cluster of asteroids near Vega 9. Use this field to hide part of your fleet. Send a small group ahead to draw the Dravic in. Once they commit to chasing, the hidden ships can strike from the side and cut them off from the station. The bridge crew exchanged doubtful glances. It was risky. Splitting the fleet in front of the enemy was something most captains avoided. But Daniel had seen her ideas work before. He nodded. All right, set course for Vega 9. Relay orders to the fleet. Group 1 follows me. Group 2 hides in the asteroid belt. Wait for my signal before engaging. The Resolute dropped out of hyperspace with a burst of light. The blackness of space opening into the glowing star system of Vega 9. The station floated ahead, surrounded by the cold emptiness of space, and 3 massive Dravic ships moving. And not like predators closing on prey, Dravic fleet is changing formation, reported the sensor officer. They've locked weapons on us. Forward shields up, Daniel ordered. Group 1, stay tight. We want them to think this is all we have. The Dravic battlecruiser surged forward, its heavy cannons firing beams of energy that lit up the void. The Resolute shook as the shields absorbed the first hit. They're chasing, Alira said quietly, watching the enemy's movement. Good, keep them focused on you. Daniel steered the ship closer, dodging blasts as much as possible. The Dravic destroyers moved in behind the cruiser, tightening their wedge formation. Just as Alira had predicted, signal Group 2, Daniel said. It's time. From behind the asteroid belt, 3 human frigates and a destroyer shot forward. Engines burning bright, they came in from the side, targeting the Dravik's exposed flank. The sudden attack caught the enemy off guard. One of the destroyers took a direct hit and spun out of formation, its shields failing. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew erupted in cheers. They're breaking formation. The tactical officer reported. Push forward, Daniel commanded. Target the battle cruiser's midsection. All weapons, fire. The combined assault from the Resolute and group to tore through the Dravik. S shields, with their formation broken, the Dravik ships could no longer protect each other. One destroyer was forced to retreat, engine smoking, while the other was disabled completely. The battlecruiser tried to turn its massive bulk toward the new threat, but it was too slow. The human fleet's concentrated firepower hit it again, and again until the great vessel's lights flickered and went dark. Enemy retreat detected. Came the report. The crew cheered again, the sound filling the bridge. Vega to 9 was safe. When the battle was over, Daniel walked over to Alira. She stood quietly near the tactical display, her hands clasped in front of her. That was your plan, he said, and it worked perfectly. I only used what your people already had, she replied softly. It was your choice to trust me. Daniel smiled faintly. I'm starting to think I'd be a fool not to. News of the victory spread quickly through the fleet. This wasn't just another battle won. It was one using the strategy of someone who had once been their enemy. The story traveled beyond the ships, reaching human colonies and even some neutral worlds. For Alira, it meant more eyes watching her every move. Some now saw her as a valuable ally. Others still whispered that she could not be trusted. But no one could deny the result. Hundreds of lives saved, and a critical outpost still standing. Later that night, Alira sat alone in her quarters, looking out at the stars. The image of the battle played in her mind, the flashes of weapons, the hum of engines, the way the enemy ships had faltered when the trap was sprung. She thought about her father's fleet, still vast and powerful. She knew this small victory would not end the war. The Dravik would regroup, and they would strike again. But for the first time since leaving her homeworld, she felt something unfamiliar, but strong. Hope that it was not hope for her own safety, or even for the human survival. It was hope for something greater. If humans and a Dravik princess could fight side by side to win a battle, maybe one day they could fight side by side to end the war completely. Daniel, in his own quarters, sat at his desk writing his report. He didn't mention that the winning strategy came from Alira, not because he wanted credit, but because he didn't want her to become an even bigger target for Dravik vengeance. Still, he knew it wouldn't remain a secret for long. He leaned back in his chair, looking out at the same stars she was watching on the other side of the ship. She's more than just a symbol, he murmured to himself. She's going to change the course of this war. And deep down, he suspected that the real battles ahead, the ones that would decide the future of both their peoples, would require her just as much as they required him. The victory at Vega 9 had changed everything. On the Resolute, Alira was no longer just a quiet figure in the background. Officers now asked for her opinion during tactical briefings. Crew members greeted her in the corridors, sometimes even smiling. But with recognition came danger. In the war rooms of the Dravik Empire, her name was now spoken with anger. Reports claimed she had helped the humans win the battle, even commanding part of their fleet. Some saw her as a traitor. Others said she had been forced. But for the Emperor, her father, there was no excuse. And back on the Resolute, not everyone welcomed her growing influence. Some human officers still saw her as the enemy, believing her kindness was only a mask for sabotage. The first sign of trouble came to nights after the battle. Alira was walking back to her quarters when she heard faint footsteps behind her. At first, she thought it was just a crew member on patrol. But when she turned the corner, the sound followed, quicker, sharper. She moved faster, her heart pounding. The corridor was quiet except for the low hum of the ship's systems. Then, from the shadows ahead, a figure stepped out. The person wore a mechanic's uniform, but the way he held himself was wrong, tense, coiled, ready to strike. Before she could speak, the man lunged, A strong hand grabbed her arm. But before he could pull her away, a voice shouted from behind. "Stand down." It was Lieutenant Harris, one of Daniel's security officers, in seconds. The attacker was on the ground, Harris pinning him with practiced force. Two more guards rushed in to help. "Dravik assassin," Harris said, his voice cold. He must have slipped aboard at the last supply transfer. Alira's hands trembled. This was the first time she had been directly targeted. She had known, in her mind, that helping the humans would make her a danger to her own people. But feeling it, seeing it in the eyes of someone who wanted her gone, was different. When Daniel heard what had happened, he came straight to her quarters. "You're not walking alone anywhere on this ship again," he said firmly. Alira met his gaze. "I knew they would see me as a traitor, but I didn't think they would send someone so soon." "They're desperate," Daniel replied, "and they know you're a threat to their plans. That means you're making a difference." She looked down at her hands. "But it also means more lives will be at risk because of me." Daniel's voice softened. "We'll keep you safe, I promise." The next day, at the morning strategy meeting, the tension was higher than usual. Several officers were present, including Commander Vance, a man who had never trusted Alira. As Daniel reviewed the next mission, Vance interrupted. "With respect, Captain, we cannot keep allowing a Dravik Royal to advise our military. It's a security risk." Alira stayed silent, her eyes calm but focused. Daniel turned to him. "She's already proven her value. Without her, Vega 9 would be gone." Vance didn't back down. "Or maybe that was part of the plan? Earn our trust, and then feed information back to her people." Murmurs spread through the room. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. Alira spoke at last. "If I wanted the Dravik to win, I would have stayed silent and let Vega 9 fall. I did not, because I want this war to end for both sides." Her voice was steady, but inside she felt the weight of every suspicious stare. Daniel ended the meeting quickly, but he could feel the division among his crew growing. He knew that one more wrong step could break the fragile trust Alira had earned. That night, the danger returned, but this time, it wasn't from outside. Alira was in the strategy room, reviewing star charts. When the lights flickered, the doors slid open, and two men stepped in. They were human crew members, but their faces were tense. Their eyes fixed on her with something close to hatred. "You shouldn't be here," one of them said. "Because of you, my brother is dead. He fought the Dravik for 5 years. Now you're standing here, giving orders to us?" Alira's heart ached at the anger in his voice. "I am sorry for your loss, truly, but I am not here to take his place. I am here to stop more losses." The second man stepped closer. "We don't need you to stop the war. We just need to win it, before the situation could turn worse." The door opened again. Daniel entered with Harris right behind him. The two crew members stepped back, but their eyes didn't leave Alira. Daniel's voice was firm. "If you have a problem, you take it up with me, not with her." The men left without a word, but the message was clear. Alira was caught between two enemies, the Dravik who wanted her gone, and the humans who didn't trust her. In the days that followed, security around her was tightened. Harris assigned 2 guards to stay near her at all times. She didn't complain, but she knew this couldn't last forever. If she wanted to be more than a protected figure, she would have to prove her worth again, and not just in the safety of a meeting. Her chance came sooner than expected. A distress call came from a neutral mining colony caught between human and Dravik forces. Both sides wanted control of the resource-rich asteroid, but the colony's leaders had refused to take sides. Now, the Dravik were moving in, and the humans had little time to respond. Daniel called Alira to the bridge. "This is risky," he said. "If we go in, we'll be outnumbered. But if we don't, the Dravik take the colony and its resources without a fight." Alira studied the tactical map. The Dravik will arrive expecting to fight humans. They won't expect the humans to fight alongside someone who knows their methods. "I can lead a diversionary squadron, just enough to make them think they're being flanked, so they pull back to defend." Daniel hesitated. "That means you'd be out there, in open space. You'd be a target." Her eyes met his. I'm already a target, at least this way. It will mean something. The Resolute dropped out of hyperspace with a soft jolt, revealing the distant glow of the mining colony. It was a small station built into the side of a massive asteroid, its docking lights blinking like tiny stars. Round it, the cold silence of space seemed almost peaceful. But peace never lasted long in a war. Dravik fleet detected. The sensor officer announced. 1 cruiser, 3 destroyers, and multiple fighter wings. Daniel leaned forward in his chair. They're here earlier than expected. Alira stood beside the tactical display, her eyes following the glowing icons that marked enemy positions. They've positioned their cruiser to block any direct approach. If we charge in, we'll lose too many ships. Daniel glanced at her. You're still sure about leading the diversion? Yes, she said firmly. If we can make them believe their rear flank is under attack, they'll have to pull ships away from the colony. That will give you an opening to push through and protect the miners. Daniel hesitated for only a moment before nodding. All right, you'll take 3 frigates and a fighter escort. Keep moving fast. If they focus on you, don't let them trap you. Alira straightened, her voice steady. Understood. Minutes later, she was aboard the Vanguard, a smaller but agile frigate with a sharp, sleek frame. The bridge crew eyed her with curiosity, and in some cases, doubt. This was the first time she would command an open battle. She didn't let it show. Walking to the captain's chair, she said, "Set course for the far side of the asteroid field. We'll use the rocks for cover." The Vanguard and its companion frigate slipped away from the Resolute, weaving between drifting chunks of stone. Alira sat with her hands resting lightly on the armrests, her gaze locked on the tactical screen. Enemy fighters moving toward the colony, her helmsman reported. Good, Alira said. Let them think we're gone. Once we're behind them, we strike. On the other side of the battlefield, the Dravik commander watched the human flagship hold position. Cowards, he muttered, convinced they were stalling. He didn't notice the 3 small frigates circling through the asteroid field. Alira's voice broke the silence on her own bridge. Now, full speed. All ships, follow me. The Vanguard burst from behind the cover of an asteroid, weapons blazing. Her frigates followed close behind, targeting the engines of the nearest Dravik destroyer. The sudden attack threw the enemy formation into chaos. They're reacting. Her tactical officer called out, to destroyers breaking off to intercept us. Exactly what we want, Alira said. Keep moving. We don't need to win. Here, just keep them chasing. The frigates darted between asteroids, firing in quick bursts before slipping back into cover. Enemy ships followed, but their larger size made them slower to turn in the tight spaces. On the Resolute, Daniel saw the opening forming. All ships, advance, target the cruiser's starboard side. The human fleet surged forward, with 2 enemy destroyers gone and the remaining 1 scrambling to respond. The Dravik cruiser found itself exposed, back in the asteroid field. The Vanguard shuddered under enemy fire. The shields flickered, warning alarms flashing across them. Bridge, shields at 40%, the engineer reported. Alira's mind raced. They had to keep the Dravik occupied just a little longer. Head toward those twin asteroids, she ordered. Once we pass between them, drop decoy beacons and loop back. The maneuver worked. The enemy ships chased the decoys deeper into the field, giving the Vanguard and its escorts a moment to regroup. From the edge of the field, Alira saw the Resolute pushing toward the colony, weapons striking the Dravik cruiser in precise bursts. She opened the comm link. Captain Reeves, the rear guard is scattered. You have a clear path. Daniel's voice came back, calm but filled with energy. Copy that. We're going in. You've done your part. Princess, now get clear. But Alira wasn't ready to leave. She saw one of the Dravik destroyers breaking off, heading back toward the colony. If it reached the battle in time, it could turn the tide. She turned to her crew. We can't let that ship return. Target its engines. The Vanguard swung round, racing toward the destroyer. It was a dangerous move. Their shields were already weakened, but with precise fire, they hit the enemy's rear thrusters. Sparks erupted from the destroyer's hull as it slowed, unable to keep up with the battle. Minutes later, the fight was over. The Dravik cruiser, heavily damaged, withdrew into hyperspace. The remaining enemy ships followed. The mining colony was safe. On the Vanguard, the crew let out relieved cheers. Some even looked at Alira with respect. Genuine respect. She allowed herself a small smile, though her heart was still pounding. When she returned to the Resolute, Daniel was waiting at the docking bay. "You did it," he said. "That was your first command in battle, and you pulled it off." Alira met his gaze. "We pulled it off. The crew was brave. They trusted me." Daniel nodded. "They trust you more now, and so do I." Later that night, Alira stood at the viewing deck, looking at the stars. She felt different. The fear that had followed her since her capture was still there, but it had changed shape. It was no longer the fear of being powerless. It was the fear of what came next, of how much more she might have to do to end this war. She knew this victory would not go unnoticed by the Dravik. Her father's generals would see her not as a captive, but as an enemy commander. The next time they faced her, they would not underestimate her. But she also knew something else. She had just taken the first step toward becoming more than a symbol. She was no longer just the fragile princess the humans had taken as a prize. She was a leader, and her path was set. The victory at the mining colony spread across human space within days. It wasn't just another battle won. It was the story behind it that captured attention. A Dravik princess, once taken as a prize, had led human ships to victory. For some, it was a tale of unlikely unity. For others, it was a warning dot in the weeks that followed. Alira noticed a change. Messages began arriving on the Resolute from human officers on other ships, asking for her advice. Even more surprising were the quiet transmissions from Dravik. Defectors, soldiers, and civilians who no longer believed in the Emperor's war. They had heard of her and wanted to join her cause. At first, Daniel was cautious. "If we're not careful, we could be walking into a trap," he said one evening as they studied the incoming messages. Alira understood. Some of them may truly want peace. Some may not. But if we close the door to all of them, we will never change anything. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Then we choose carefully. Every person who joins us must be tested." Their small alliance began to grow. Ships from human fleets, crews of mixed species, and even a few Dravik officers who claimed loyalty to Alira slowly gathered under a new banner. Not of one race, but of unity against the endless war. The Resolute became more than just a ship. It became a moving symbol of hope. But hope made enemies just as quickly as it made friends far away. In the Emperor's War Council chamber, news of Alira's growing influence filled the room. The generals spoke with sharp voices. "She commands fleets against us," one growled. "She speaks to our people and turns them." Another added. The Emperor's expression was hard. "She was my daughter. Now she is my enemy. And this before her name becomes stronger than mine." A plan was formed, one that would appear as an opportunity for peace, but in truth would be a trap. Weeks later, a message reached the Resolute. It came from a Dravik commander, claiming to have control over a small border world and wishing to defect. He offered his fleet and the planet's resources in exchange for protection. Daniel studied the message with narrowed eyes. "It's the perfect." Alira looked at the transmission again. It could be real. Some Dravik commanders are losing faith in the Emperor. But yes, it could also be the bait for a trap. "Then we need proof before we go anywhere near that world," Daniel said. But the situation became urgent. The same commander sent a second message, this time claiming that his world was under attack from loyalist forces and begging for help. Alira felt the weight of the decision. If the message was true and they ignored it, they would lose allies. If it was false, they could lose everything. Finally, she said, "I will go. If it is a trap, I am the one they want, not the fleet." Daniel shook his head instantly. "Absolutely not. I'm not sending you alone into Dravik space." "I won't be alone," she said calmly. "I'll take a small escort. If we are careful, we can see the truth before committing the fleet." The mission was set. The Vanguard, fast and lightly armed, carried Alira and a small crew into the border region. For most of the journey, the space around them was empty and silent. But as they neared the planet, the silence broke. Multiple ships on approach, the sensor officer reported. They're not firing. Yet, on the screen, a Dravic cruiser appeared, flanked by two smaller ships. A voice came through the comms, deep, controlled, and strangely polite. Princess Alira, it said, you honor us with your presence. Please, dock with our station so we may discuss our shared future. Alira's eyes narrowed. That voice, I know it. She turned to her crew. It's General Corson. He is one of my father's most loyal commanders, which meant this was no peaceful meeting. Instead of answering, Alira ordered the Vanguard to break formation and head for the planet's far side. The Dravic ships gave chase, their engines burning bright in the darkness, shields up. The captain of the Vanguard called. The small ship darted between the planet's moons, using their gravity to slingshot away from the cruiser's line of fire. Laser bursts lit the black sky, each one just missing their hull. Alira's mind raced. If we can reach the dark side of the planet, we can hide in the debris field. It's the only way to lose them. Long enough to signal the Resolute, the crew followed her orders without question. The Vanguard dove into the debris field, a swirling cloud of rock and broken satellite parts. The Dravic ships hesitated to enter, knowing the hazards. That moment was enough. On the Resolute, Daniel received the emergency signal. All hands, battle stations, he ordered. We're going to get her. Within hours, the Resolute and two escort ships arrived, catching the Dravic fleet off guard. The sudden counterattack forced Corson's ships to retreat, their plan ruined. When the Vanguard docked back with the Resolute, Alira stepped off the ramp and met Daniel's gaze. You were right, she admitted. It was a trap. Daniel shook his head. And you were right too. They want you, which means we need to be ready for more. That night, Alira stood in the quiet observation deck, watching the stars drift by. Her near capture had shown her the truth. The Emperor would stop at nothing to end her rise. But it also made something else clear. Her victories had begun to inspire people on both sides of the war. If she could survive the traps ahead, she might be able to gather enough strength to face the Emperor himself. She wasn't just part of the war anymore. She was becoming the center of it. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the next step would decide whether peace was truly possible, or if the galaxy would remain locked in endless battle. The galaxy had changed in only a few months, where once there had been only two great powers, the Human Alliance and the Dravic Empire. Now there was a third force, made of both humans and Dravic who wanted peace. At its heart stood Alira, the once fragile princess who had become a commander. Her victories had drawn fleets from across the stars. Human captains volunteered to fight under her banner. Dravic defectors risked their lives to join her. Even small neutral worlds began sending supplies. But everyone knew the war would not end until the Emperor himself was faced. Daniel stood with Alira in the Resolute strategy room, the galactic map glowing between them. At the very center of the Dravic Empire was the capital world, Drenvar. Protected by the largest fleet in known space, it was thought to be untouchable. If we strike there, Daniel said, it will be the most dangerous battle we've ever fought. Alira's gaze was steady. If we don't strike there, the war will go on forever. My father will never surrender unless he sees with his own eyes that the galaxy has turned against him. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we'll do it, together. The united fleet gathered in the far reaches of space. Dozens of human warships and sleek Dravic vessels moved into formation. The sight alone was enough to inspire hope and fear. On the bridge of the Resolute, officers prepared for what might be their final mission. Daniel took his seat in the command chair, while Alira stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. All ships report ready, the comm officer said. Daniel glanced at Alira. Your order, Commander. Her voice was clear. Set course. For Drenvar, the fleet jumped into hyperspace, the stars stretching into streaks of light before vanishing into the blue tunnel of faster than light travel. They arrived at the edge of the Drenvar system, and the Emperor's fleet was waiting Rows of massive Dravik warships blocked the path to the capital. The lead vessel, larger than anything the humans had ever built, bristled with weapons. "This is it," Daniel said quietly. The enemy hailed them. A familiar voice filled the bridge, deep, commanding, and filled with cold anger. "Alira," the Emperor said, "you stand with our enemies, and you dare to come here? You have shamed your blood. There will be no mercy." Alira took a step forward. "Father, it doesn't have to end this way. Look at the fleets before you, humans and Dravik together. This war has cost enough lives. Join us, and we can build something greater." The Emperor's reply was ice. "I will never bow to traitors." The transmission cut, and the enemy fleet began to move. "Battle stations," Daniel ordered. The two fleets clashed in a storm of light and fire. Human ships darted between the heavy Dravik cruisers, striking weak points and pulling away before they could be hit. Dravik defectors used their knowledge of the Empire's tactics to outmaneuver their former allies. Alira coordinated the attack from the bridge, giving rapid orders to both human and Dravik captains. Squadron 5, swing around and cut off. Their supply ships, Group 3, focus fire on the flagship's port side. Its shields are weaker there. The battle raged on, but the Emperor's fleet was vast. Every time the united forces broke one line, another took its place. Then a transmission came from the vanguard, leaving the left flank. "We can't hold much longer." Alira knew the key was the Emperor's flagship, if they could disable it. The rest of the fleet might lose the will to fight. She turned to Daniel. "We need to break through now." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "It's a suicide run." "Not if we move fast enough," she said. The Resolute, the Vanguard, and a handful of escort ships pushed straight through the thick of the battle. Enemy fire rained down on them, but the fleet covered their advance, taking the hits meant for them. As they neared the flagship, Alira's voice was calm but firm. "Target their main thrusters. If we stop them from moving, the fight will end sooner." The Resolute's weapons roared to life, striking the rear of the flagship. Sparks and fire burst from its engines, slowing the massive ship. Inside the enemy vessel, the Emperor's command crew scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The united fleet closed in, surrounding the flagship. The comm channel opened again, and the Emperor appeared on screen, his face lit by the flicker of battle. "You would destroy your own people for them?" he demanded. Alira met his gaze. "No, I would save my people from you." There was a long pause. Then the Emperor's shoulders lowered, the weight of defeat in his eyes. "Enough," he said at last. "Order the fleet to stand down." Across the battlefield, the Dravik ships stopped firing. Silence fell over the comms, broken only by the crackle of damaged systems. Hours later, the leaders of the Human Alliance and the Dravik Empire met aboard the Resolute. For the first time in decades, there was no battle plan, only a peace agreement. Alira stood between the two sides, speaking for the new coalition. "This war began because we feared each other. It ends because we chose to fight that fear instead of each other. From this day forward, we build a galaxy where strength is measured not by the battles we win, but by the peace we keep." The room was silent for a heartbeat, and then the applause began, hesitant at first, then strong. In the months that followed, the fleets returned to their homeworlds not as enemies, but as protectors. The mining colony thrived. Vega 9 became a symbol of unity, and the Resolute continued to sail among the stars. Now as a flagship of peacekeeping forces, Alira often stood at the viewing deck, watching the endless stretch of stars. She knew the galaxy would still have challenges, but she no longer faced them as a captive or as a fragile princess. She was a commander, a leader, and, in the eyes of many, the reason the war had ended. Daniel sometimes joined her, standing quietly by her side. On one such evening, he said, "When I chose you as my prize, I thought I was taking a risk. Turns out, I was making the smartest choice of my life." Alira smiled faintly, her eyes on the horizon of light. "We both took a risk, Daniel, and together, we changed the galaxy." The Resolute moved forward into the dark, its path lit by distant stars, not toward another war, but toward the promise of what came after. Daniel stayed hidden with the alien woman inside the hollow tree for several minutes. Listening carefully, the strange clicking sounds faded into the distance. But the forest still felt tense and silent. He didn't know how far those creatures had gone, or if they would return. The woman was breathing slowly now, but he could see she was still in pain. The jacket he had pressed to her wound was soaked with a strange shimmering liquid. It looked nothing like blood, yet it pulsed faintly, as if it carried light through her veins. Daniel knew they couldn't stay here for long. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he whispered, even though she wouldn't understand his words. Still, he kept speaking in a calm voice, not for her understanding, but to keep them both steady. When he shifted to lift her again, she made a soft sound and shook her head slightly, as if telling him she could walk. She pushed against the tree roots, trying to stand, but her legs trembled. Without thinking, Daniel moved closer and supported her with one arm. As they stepped out into the night air, Daniel glanced toward the direction of his cabin. It wasn't too far, maybe half an hour if they moved carefully. There, he had medical supplies, water, and a place to hide her. The forest path was dark and uneven, but Daniel knew every twist and slope. He kept the flashlight low so the beam wouldn't be seen from far away. She walked beside him slowly, her hand gripping his sleeve for balance. Once, they passed through a patch of moonlight, and Daniel saw her clearly. Her face had sharp, graceful lines, and her eyes, though tired, still glowed faintly. There was a quiet strength in her expression, as if she was used to danger but still unwilling to give up. They hadn't gone far when a faint hum filled the air. Daniel froze and looked up. High above the trees, a dark shape floated. Not a bird, not a plane, but something that moved with an unnatural smoothness. It gave off a dim red light that scanned the ground in wide sweeps. The woman's grip on his sleeve tightened. She whispered something in her language, the words soft but tense. Daniel didn't need translation. The meaning was clear. They had to hide, and fast. He led her off the trail, crouching low as they slipped behind a large cluster of boulders covered in moss. The hum passed overhead, the red light sweeping dangerously close. Daniel held his breath until it faded into the distance. When it was gone, they continued moving, but more carefully than before. Daniel could feel her leaning heavier on him, her steps slowing. She was losing strength. Almost. "There," he said quietly. His cabin's outline finally appeared between the trees, a small, sturdy building made of weathered wood, with a dim porch light glowing like a safe beacon in the night. Inside, Daniel guided her to the couch and quickly fetched his first aid kit. She sat still, watching his every move. He could see she was studying him, perhaps wondering why he was helping at all. He knelt in front of her, opening the kit. "I'm going to help clean the wound," he said softly, holding up a bottle of antiseptic. She tilted her head slightly at the sound of his voice, but didn't resist when he began gently removing the jacket from her side. Up close, the injury looked worse than he thought. The shimmering liquid still flowed slowly, but the edges of the wound seemed almost mechanical, as if parts of her body weren't made the same way a human's was. Daniel pushed away his curiosity. First, she needed treatment. He cleaned the wound with slow, careful movements. When his hand touched the deepest part, she tensed sharply, but instead of pulling away, she looked directly into his eyes. There was something in her gaze, something like surprise. It was as if she didn't expect him to dare touch her injury, as if such closeness was rare among her kind. Daniel didn't break eye contact. "It's all right," he said, his voice steady. He pressed the clean cloth firmly against the wound to slow the bleeding. For a few moments, they stayed like that, his hand keeping pressure, her hand resting lightly on his wrist. Then she leaned back slightly, breathing easier. Daniel quickly made a makeshift bandage, wrapping it around her side. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold until she could get proper care, wherever that might be. When he was done, she touched her chest lightly, then pointed at him. It wasn't hard to guess she was thanking him in her own way. Daniel gave a small nod. "You're welcome," just as the air between them felt calm. A noise outside made them both turn sharply. It wasn't the wind. This was heavier, like something moving through the trees, and it was close. Daniel quickly turned off the porch light, plunging the cabin into shadow. He motioned for her to stay low while he peered out the window. Through the trees, he saw faint red glows, moving slowly, scanning. The same kind of hunters from the forest. They had tracked her here. Daniel's pulse quickened, but his mind stayed focused. They needed a plan, and they needed it now.